My name is Beth Finch. I'm here representing the Brewster Historical Society, and I'm standing in front of the Harris Black House, which is part of the historic village that has been put together and is owned by the Historical Society. This little house looks so nice. It probably looks as nice as it did when it was first built in 1795. And to tell the truth, it might look better. It was built in 1795 by John Harris, a seafaring man, a young man and his wife, Sarah. And they moved into this house where they had 6 children. The youngest, Elizabeth, was born in 1803. John died in 1804. But before we get into all the family history, let's look at the building itself. By the time the Historical Society acquired this building, it was in sad disrepair. It had been built way back in the woods, the outback of Brewster, even in the 18th century, on Red Top Road, a town road even then. By the time the Historical Society acquired it, it had lost its roof, its floor, its chimney. But John Mackenzie, a skilled and talented restorer of antique houses, was hired by the Society to repair and rebuild this house. He was able to find 70% of the framing, the window frames, some of the doors, the fireplace is all original. Everything that he built onto it to repair it was either antique or acquired, such as the floorboards, which are wide board white pine. The windows are antique glass. You can see that they're wavy. The paint, some of the paint was still there. They could tell what color it was, and the red around the fireplace is a reproduction of the original paint. So let's go inside and see some of these things. We're not going to go upstairs. The stairs are steep. Personally, I think fit only for children. And it was the children who would have slept upstairs in this bare, unheated loft, the only light from a small window, the only heat from the fireplace downstairs, and perhaps radiating off the chimney. So let's go into the main room, in fact, the only room of the house. So let's talk about the building itself. As you can see, it has real windows. That must have been a blessing in the 18th century. The room has the wide boards that they would have had because there were still ancient trees at the time, all gone now, and in fact, for a couple hundred years. The original rafters are here. The floors, of course, are new. Probably these ceiling boards are new, but I'm not sure of that. If you can see, there's a little trap door here in the corner. This is where the lady of the house would have gone downstairs to store and then retrieve the winter vegetables, the milk, the butter, whatever needed to be cool. This is in the original place where the original hatch was. This is the surround of the fireplace. It's painted this really lovely dark red. And as I mentioned, this is buttermilk paint, a recreation of the original paint of which there were little flecks left. The fireplace is exceptionally deep for the time, which must have been a satisfaction to the cook of the house. But I want you to think about this. Pretend you are a woman in the early 1800s. You are dressed as all women are, in a long skirt, probably several petticoats, and you are going to tend the cooking. Now, there are hooks in here to hang pots. There's an area where you can put a pot on the ashes, but you still have to lean in. You're tending the fire, you're stirring the soup, and your petticoats are all over. One of the leading causes of death of women was burning. We have some pots, pans that are not original to the house, but are contemporary. I want you to notice this beautiful cabinet right here. This is unusual for this house. As you can see looking around, this is a poor house, and it was in general only the wealthy houses that had this lovely cabinet type of adornment next to the fireplace. What's unique about this house is that it's here. Probably in the 18th and early 19th centuries, there were many houses like this, because this is the kind of place ordinary people would live. Now, if you were a shipmaster or a merchant and had a great deal of money, you would build a fine house, a house that your descendants and the people they eventually sold the houses to would want to maintain, protect, and glory in. But this is the house you would want to move out of as soon as possible. What's unique about this house is that it may be unique. It may be the only modest house left on Cape Cod from this era. I don't know of another. This cradle was in the family. It was donated by a descendant of the original owners to the Historical Society. Someone has made for the cradle a doll, just made out of sticks and simple cloth, which may well have been what the children played with. There was no money, I would think, in this family for anything much more elaborate. But this is a working family. Again, this is not original to the house, but it is contemporary. And I personally am fascinated by this shovel. It's wood, it has a metal rim, it has reinforcements, and in fact, where it broke once, it has additional reinforcements. But this handle, now someone told me this is not unusual. It was unusual for me. This is a stout limb split with a brace here to create a handle. It's heavy, but very practical, very useful. This box was used by a member of the original family in its later days, and was called a cranberry box. Of course, every housewife needed her spinning wheels and her flax winding wheels. Can you guess what this is? It's beautifully made, hand carved. Can you see the shape of it? And unfortunately, it's come apart, but we can figure it out. This house had no well. The nearest water was some distance away. You have to walk there with a bucket to get water for cleaning, washing yourself, cooking. This is a yoke. This is a handle to hold the pail. It attaches to the rope. The little hook there holds the pail. Would have been another one on the other side to balance. This is the interior door. It separates the main room of the house from the stairs going to the loft. This is the original door. This is the original blue paint. Now we've talked about the house. Let's talk a little bit about the family that lived here. John Harris, born in, 1777, died in 1804. When John was born, And when the house was built, it was in the north parish of the town of Harwich. The country was very new. They were way out in the country here. This was a real homestead. When John died in 1804, leaving his wife with 6 children, the youngest a year old, his property was assessed to see how much he was worth and what Sarah owed in estate taxes. So let's just look at this. The homestead was worth $308. He bought the land for £5 and 8 shillings. It was 3 acres of woodland. Now it's worth $308. So I'm not quite sure how dollars relate to pounds, but it sounds like he really improved the place. His personal estate, the most valuable thing here is a bed and 2 pillows. It was a bed. If you've ever looked at old wills, they often leave my second best bed too. Beds were important and apparently pretty expensive. The next most valuable thing he has is a 12-year-old heifer. Now, with all these children, this was a real asset. It goes on, and at the end, they gave Mrs. Harris a break. Instead of paying the full tax due, she was only required to pay 22 cents on the dollar. Clearly, this family was not wealthy, as her creditors found out. She, Sarah, is buried in the cemetery on Red Top Road next to her husband, as are most of the descendants of John and Sarah Harris. Now, the house and property was left not to one of the sons, but to the youngest child, the daughter, Elizabeth. Elizabeth married Nathan Black, the first Nathan Black of that name. They were married in 1822. Nathan was from South Yarmouth. He was from OA. Nathan died in 1865. Elizabeth lived on to 1881. They had, I can only say a number of children. Some say 10, some say 12, some say 13. Whatever it was many. Now, infant death was not unusual, so perhaps if it was 13 births, some of them never survived infancy. We know the names of at least 10, and we know them for sure because here is the page from the family Bible that lists the births and deaths. There are many lines that are difficult to read, so it's hard to know what you'd think we'd know from the page in the family Bible. There's at least one daughter who died young. Perhaps there were 9 or 10 who survived to adulthood. Now, I have thought, looking around this house, how can you possibly have 10 children and 2 parents living in this space? Well, the children are sleeping upstairs, so that takes care of some part of this. You figure that they probably had a garden, they probably had jobs working out, so they were not in the house all the time. I'm still not comfortable with this. Now, I have discovered that at this period in time, it was not unusual for children we would think would be much too young to be sent out. Boys could be cabin boys as young as 9. Girls could be sent out as house servants at the same age. So perhaps there were never 12 people living in this house, but there was a census in 1820 that showed there were 6 children living at home. Now, maybe the 22-year-old is sleeping here occasionally and going out to work. I'm still overwhelmed with the efficiency of this family to maintain a life and raise the children in spaces we would think would be small for one person. The first Nathan Black He died in 1865. But Elizabeth, his wife, lived on to 1881. Now think of that. She was born in 1804, when Brewster had just become a town. By 1881, she had lived through depressions and inflations, prosperous times and poor times. She'd lived through the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, of Abraham Lincoln. She had survived. I wonder how much the great events of the outside world affected her. She probably knew about them, but perhaps it was this large household of children and maintaining her own life that filled her time. In 1881, Brewster had 5 schoolhouses, because of course you had to walk or get there by horse if you were lucky, so it couldn't be too far away. It had a brand new town hall that had been wildly celebrated. Elizabeth had seen a lot of change in her lifetime in this little house. So when Elizabeth died, she left the property not actually to any of her children. You remember Elizabeth had inherited it, a daughter of the family. When she died, she left it to her son Timothy's wife. Now Timothy was married to Bridget Malady, who was fresh off the boat, they say, from Cork, Ireland. So now we are bringing in some people from farther away, not just from South Yarmouth. We're mixing up the population of Brewster. So Bridget is now the owner of the house. Timothy and Bridget had 5 children, and one of them they named Nathan Black. So now you're going to get names a little bit confused. The first Nathan was the husband of Elizabeth, the daughter of the original owners. This Nathan is that Nathan's grandson. Nathan Black was born in 1865. He lived until 1957. We might have known him. In fact, many people still around did know him. He was a man of many skills. He was a cranberry man. He worked for other cranberry owners and did some cranberrying on his own. He's best known for being a barber. At some point, the family abandoned this house and they built a grand new house across the street, across Red Top Road, and moved into that. This building became a storage place, a cranberry barn. It was minimally maintained, and after it was no longer a use for some of those things, that's why it was in such poor condition when the Historical Society took it over. So Nathan Black and his wife Emily Ellis are now living in the grand house across the street. So Nathan Black has a barn. He sets up a barber shop. It has 2 chairs. He calls it the Black Hills Emporium. Twice a week on Wednesday and Saturday, he would walk over to East Dennis and set up a barber shop in David Sears' store and cut hair for the town, the village of East Dennis. There was a selectman in town who said that as a boy, his father was walking him over to Nate Black's place to get his hair cut, but they met Nate walking back from East Dennis on the way. And so he said he just sat on a rock and Barber Black cut his hair right there. Nate and Emily had their children, and their daughter, Jenny Black Baker, inherited this property. It is interesting that all through the generations, it's been the woman of the family who's been the heir. So Jenny Baker was the last of the family to live on the property. The grand house across the street, the owner of this, and the owner still of a great deal of that 300 acres that her great-great-great-grandfather had bought way back in the 1790s. So that's the story of this house. A house that you might never see another place. A house that has so many memories. Even if we knew what they were, we couldn't remember them. Thank you for visiting with me, and I hope you'll come back, see it in person, and appreciate what it's like to live in the late 18th century. Thank you.